There is a $2 formula, 3 ingredients, 1 jar, 1 rag, that will make rotting, cracked, gray, dead wood look like it was just cut from a living tree. No sanding, no power tools, no contractor, no $800 quote, just $2. And about 15 minutes. And the industry, the multi-billion-dollar wood restoration and refinishing industry, has spent decades making sure you never, ever find out about it. Tonight, that changes. Close your eyes for a second. I want you to picture something. You have a deck. Maybe it's been there for 10 years, maybe longer. The wood is cracked, it's gray, it's chalky and dry and dead-looking. You've watched it get worse every single summer, and every single summer someone has handed you a quote. $800, $1,200. One quote for a deck refinishing job that came in at $2,400. Labor and materials, the contractor said, like you'd asked. Or maybe it's not a deck. Maybe it's the old farmhouse table your grandmother left you. The one that has sentimental weight you couldn't put a price on. Except now it's dull. The finish is gone. There are rings from coffee cups and watermarks from rain. It's starting to look like something you'd find at a garage sale. Or the fence, the garden furniture, the antique dresser. The hardwood floor in the back bedroom that you've been covering with a rug for 4 years because you can't afford to have it restored. Here's what happens when you apply this formula to any of those surfaces. Within minutes, not hours, minutes, you watch the wood begin to drink. Literally absorb what you're applying. The grain comes alive. The color deepens. Cracks that looked permanent begin to close as the wood swells with moisture it hasn't felt in years. By the time it's dry, what was gray is golden. What was cracked is smooth. What was dead is, for all practical purposes, reborn. Your neighbor walks past and does a double take. Did you refinish your deck? Who did you hire? Nobody, you say. Cost me $2 on a Saturday afternoon. That's not a fantasy. That is what happens when you stop buying what they're selling and start using what they buried. Now, before I give you the formula, and I will, every last detail, step by step, I need to tell you something. This formula is not new. It's not something I invented. It's not trending on social media. It wasn't developed in a lab last year by a brand that's going to charge you $59 for a pre-mixed bottle of it. This formula is old, genuinely old. And the reason most people have never heard of it isn't because it doesn't work. It's because it works too well. Think about that for a moment. If there was a solution that cost $2, that anyone could make at home in 60 seconds, that genuinely restored damaged wood at the molecular level, what would that do to an industry built on expensive products, repeat services, and the assumption that you, the homeowner, have no idea what you're doing? It would gut it, because here is how that industry works. It does not want you to restore your wood once and be done with it. It wants you dependent. It wants you believing that wood restoration is complicated, that it requires professionals, that it requires their branded products, their proprietary formulas, their maintenance cycles, their $300 power sanders, and their $60 stripping agents, and their $90 restoration oils that you have to reapply every single year or the warranty is void. That is the business model. Dependency. Repetition. The quiet, consistent extraction of money from people who just want their wood to look good. And sitting at the bottom of all of it, buried under 100 years of marketing, 100 years of product launches and industry lobbying and contractor licensing, is a formula that makes almost all of it unnecessary. They prayed you'd forget. Most people did. You're about to remember. To understand this formula, you have to go back, not decades, centuries. Long before there were refinishing contractors, long before there were hardware superstores, long before there was a single branded wood restoration product on a single shelf anywhere in the world, people still had wood. And they still needed to protect it. Ships, furniture, homes, barns, churches. The great wooden cathedrals of Europe, with their hand-carved beams and their century-spanning structures, none of them had access to polyurethane. None of them had oil-based stains from a can, and yet some of that wood is still standing today, still intact, still structurally sound after 500 years. How? The answer, traced back through carpenters' notebooks, apothecary records, and shipbuilders' manuals from the 1600s, is almost embarrassingly simple. Linseed oil, derived from the flax plant, one of the oldest agricultural crops in human history, used in Egyptian mummies, in Viking ship construction, in Renaissance painting mediums, in the preservation of ancient manuscripts. Linseed oil has been penetrating and protecting wood for longer than most modern nations have existed. Vinegar, white or apple cider, both derivatives of fermentation. A substance so old and so universally useful that it appears in records from ancient Babylon, ancient China, ancient Rome. A mild acid with remarkable cleaning and bonding properties that was used by craftsmen across cultures to prepare wood surfaces for treatment. And turpentine, distilled from pine resin, the original solvent, used by painters, woodworkers, and preservationists for centuries as a carrier. Something that opens the pores of the material it touches and drives other substances deeper into the grain than surface application alone could ever achieve. 3 ingredients, each one ancient, each one cheap, each one independently used by craftsmen across the world for hundreds of years. And at some point, in some workshop, in some barn, in some shipbuilder's yard in the 1700s or early 1800s, someone discovered that combining them in specific proportions created something more powerful than any of the 3 alone. A penetrating restoration formula that didn't sit on the surface of wood like a varnish or a paint. One that drove down into the cellular structure, feeding the fibers, filling the microfractures, rebuilding the wood from the inside out. That discovery was passed down, carpenter to apprentice, farmer to son, craftsman to craftsman. It lived in the oral tradition of people who worked with their hands, who couldn't afford to replace every board that cracked, who needed their wood to last because their livelihoods depended on it. And then the 20th century arrived, and everything changed. The post-World War II economic boom didn't just change how Americans lived, it changed what they believed was possible. Suddenly, chemistry was magic. Factories were gods. If a product came in a bottle with a label and a brand name, it must be better than whatever your grandfather made in a bucket. That belief, that synthetic and branded is superior to natural and simple, is the most expensive assumption in the history of home maintenance. Because the corporations that built the wood care industry in the mid-20th century didn't do it by creating better products. They did it by creating better marketing. They introduced terms like professional-grade formula and advanced penetrating technology and nanoparticle restoration complex. Language engineered not to inform you, but to make you feel unqualified. To make you feel like wood restoration was chemistry too complicated for someone without a degree. They lobbied for contractor licensing requirements. They created certification programs. They built an entire ecosystem designed to make the homeowner feel dependent and helpless. And the prices climbed accordingly. Let's talk numbers for a second, because this is where it gets genuinely infuriating. The average cost for professional deck refinishing in the United States today is between $800 and $3,000, depending on size and condition. That's for a single treatment. On a treated deck, the industry recommends doing this every 2 to 3 years. Over the life of a 30-year deck, you are looking at between $8,000 and $30,000 six on a surface made of wood 6 if you follow their recommendations. A 200 square foot deck? One of the leading branded deck restoration oils on the market costs about $60 per can and covers roughly 150 square feet. So you're spending at least $80 in product alone every year or two on top of the labor of preparation, which they tell you requires sanding, stripping, and priming. The $2 formula we're discussing today covers the same 200 square foot deck, requires no sanding, no stripping, no priming, and lasts when correctly applied, 2 to 4 times longer between reapplications than the branded alternatives. But what happens next is the part they don't want you to hear. This formula is not the only thing they buried. I have to be honest with you about something. I've spent years, digging through old carpenter's manuals, agricultural preservation guides, shipbuilders' records, estate sale find handbooks, apothecary texts going back to the colonial era. And what I found was not one secret, it was a whole archive of them. Formulas for rust removal that use nothing more than molasses and thyme. Concrete crack repair using materials that cost less than $5 and last longer than commercial epoxy. window seal restoration, leather reconditioning, stone cleaning, fabric waterproofing, one after another after another. Solutions so effective and so cheap that if the public knew about them, entire product categories would collapse overnight. I compiled them, all of them, organized, sourced, explained, and verified. I'm going to tell you where to find that archive at the end of this video. But first, because you came here for the wood formula, and because this formula alone will save you thousands of dollars before the year is out, let's talk science. Here is exactly why this formula works, and why it works better than what the industry is selling you. Wood is not a solid material. Even when it looks dead and dry, wood is a cellular structure. Billions of tiny tubes and chambers aligned along the grain that were once filled with water, sap, and resin when the tree was alive. When wood dries out, whether from age, weather, or neglect, those chambers empty, the fibers shrink. Microfractures form along the grain lines. The surface becomes rough. It checks, cracks, splinters, and turns gray as the lignin, the natural binder that holds the wood fibers together, begins to break down under UV exposure. This is not a surface problem. That gray, cracked, dead-looking wood isn't just dirty on the outside. It's depleted on the inside. Surface treatments, most commercial stains, sealers, and top coats address this incorrectly. They sit on top of the wood. They create a film. And a film on depleted wood is like painting a wall that's falling apart from within. It looks better for a season. Then it peels, it bubbles, it cracks, and you're back where you started. Except now you have to strip the old product before you can apply anything new. The linseed vinegar turpentine formula does something fundamentally different. Linseed oil, specifically raw linseed oil, is a drying oil, meaning it undergoes polymerization when it penetrates a material and is exposed to oxygen. It doesn't stay liquid inside the wood. It cures. It literally hardens within the cellular structure of the wood, refilling those empty chambers, rebonding the shrunken fibers, and creating a flexible internal matrix that moves with the wood as it expands and contracts with temperature and humidity changes. This is why it doesn't crack the way a rigid surface coating does. The vinegar component, specifically the acetic acid, functions as a mild chelating agent. It binds to and loosens mineral deposits, mold spores, and the gray oxidized lignin on the surface, allowing the penetrating agents to reach undamaged wood fiber beneath. It also lowers the surface tension of the formula, allowing it to spread more evenly at the cellular level. And turpentine is the delivery mechanism. As a natural solvent derived from pine resin, it temporarily opens the wood's pores, dilating the cellular structure just long enough for the linseed oil to penetrate multiple layers deep rather than sitting at the surface. Once the turpentine evaporates, the pores close behind the oil, which is now curing inside the wood rather than on top of it. The result is restoration, not concealment. Compare that to commercial deck oils, which are primarily alkyd resins, synthetic alternatives to linseed oil that polymerize more slowly, penetrate more shallowly, and degrade more rapidly under UV and moisture exposure. You're paying $60 a can for an inferior version of what linseed oil does naturally. And you've been doing it for years. Let's make this concrete. A quart of raw linseed oil, $3 to $5. A bottle of white distilled vinegar, under $2. A small can of pure gum spirits turpentine, $6 to $8. Total investment for enough formula to treat a 200 square foot deck, a full set of garden furniture, 3 fence panels, and still have enough left over for your dining table. Approximately $2 per application surface. That is not a typo. $2 against an $800 professional service, against $60 per can of branded product, reapplied annually, with mandatory sanding prep that adds hours of labor and equipment cost. Over 10 years, just 10 years. The difference in cost between the DIY formula and the industry standard approach is, conservatively, several $1,000s. Per household, per decade. Multiply that by the millions of homeowners who have decks, fences, floors, and furniture that need restoration every few years. Do the math. That is the size of the industry this formula threatens. That is why you've never seen it advertised. That is why no influencer with a brand deal has ever shown you this on camera. There is no profit in it. That's the whole problem. I want to address something that some of you are already thinking. If this works so well, why isn't everyone doing it? Why haven't I heard about this? The answer is simple, and it's the same answer that applies to almost every genuinely effective, genuinely cheap solution in the world. There's nothing to sell. Linseed oil cannot be patented. It's a natural agricultural product. Vinegar is the same, turpentine is the same. Nobody can own this formula. Nobody can trademark it or create a proprietary version that only they can legally produce. Nobody can build a subscription model around it or create a maintenance service that requires a certified technician. You can't run a $2 billion industry on something you can't own. So instead, what happens is this. The companies with marketing budgets fund the studies that compare their products to each other, never to natural alternatives. The industry publications that contractors read are funded by advertising from product manufacturers. The home improvement channels that explain how to restore wood have sponsorship relationships with branded product companies. The search results you get when you Google how to restore wood are populated by content farms and affiliate marketing pages that earn commissions by pointing you toward products. The formula we're discussing today doesn't generate commissions. It doesn't have a PR team. It doesn't sponsor YouTube channels or pay for Google ads. It's just old and effective and completely, utterly outside the profit system. That's why you've never heard of it. Until now. Before we get to the instructions, I need to take 60 seconds to be completely straight with you, because this matters. This formula is genuinely effective, but it comes with real safety requirements. Turpentine is flammable. Raw linseed oil is not just flammable. It is spontaneously combustible when left on rags. This is not hypothetical. Spontaneous combustion from linseed oil-soaked rags has caused house fires. It has caused fatalities. In 1991, a significant warehouse fire in Los Angeles was traced to improperly discarded linseed oil rags. This is a documented real-world risk. So here is what you do. When you are done applying the formula, do not fold your rags and throw them in the trash or leave them in a pile. Lay them flat. Spread them outside on a concrete surface away from anything flammable. Let them dry completely, fully oxidized, before disposal. Or submerge them in water in a sealed metal container until you can dispose of them properly. Work in ventilated areas. Keep turpentine away from open flames, sparks, and pilot lights. Wear gloves. Linseed oil penetrates skin and can cause sensitization with repeated exposure. Follow those precautions, and this formula is as safe as painting a wall. Ignore them, and you're taking a serious risk. I'm telling you this because the people who passed this formula down took it seriously. So should you. All right, here it is, the formula, every step. What you need. Raw linseed oil, not boiled. Raw, available at any hardware store or online, white distilled vinegar. Pure gum spirits turpentine, not mineral spirits, actual turpentine. A clean glass jar with a lid. A clean cotton rag. Old t-shirts work perfectly. The ratio. 1 part raw linseed oil, 1 part white vinegar, 1 part turpentine. That's it. Equal parts. The proportions are not complicated. The formula was designed to be reproduced by anyone, anywhere, without measuring equipment. Step 1. Measure your ingredients. For most household applications, a table, a set of chairs, a section of fencing, 1/3 of a cup of each is more than enough. Scale up for larger surfaces. Step 2. Combine them in your glass jar. Close the lid and shake for 30 seconds. The formula will be a light amber color. It will smell strongly of turpentine, which dissipates as it dries. Step 3. Clean your wood surface. Remove any loose debris, dirt, or flaking old finish with a stiff brush. You do not need to sand. You do not need to strip. You simply need the surface to be clean and dry. Step 4. Dip your rag, wring out the excess so it's damp rather than soaking, and begin applying the formula with the grain. Work in sections. Don't rush. Give the wood time to absorb each stroke before moving on. Step 5. Watch what happens. Particularly on dry or damaged wood, You will see the formula absorb almost immediately. The grain will darken and deepen. Keep applying to any areas that continue to absorb rapidly. Those are the most depleted sections and they need the most product. Step 6. Allow the first coat to penetrate for 15 to 20 minutes. Then wipe away any excess that hasn't absorbed. Don't leave pooled formula on the surface. It will become tacky. Step 7. For heavily damaged wood, apply a second coat after 24 hours. For lightly weathered wood, one coat is typically sufficient. Step 8. Lay your rags flat outside to dry completely before disposal. This is the step people skip. Don't skip it. That's the entire process. 3 ingredients, 8 steps, $2.